Okay, we are very excited to be here today with Chef AJ. Now, Chef AJ has been devoted to a plant-based diet for almost 40 years. She's the host of the television series Healthy Living with Chef AJ, which airs on Foodie TV. She's a chef, a culinary instructor, and a professional speaker. And she's also the author of the popular book Unprocessed: How to Achieve Vibrant Health and Your Ideal Weight. And she has a new book coming out called The Secrets to Ultimate Weight Loss, a revolutionary approach to conquer cravings, overcome food addiction, and lose weight without going hungry. She's also hilarious and has an incredible personality. So we're very excited to have her here today. So thanks so much for taking the time to be with us here today, Chef AJ.
Thank you, but no pressure there. Now I have to have a good personality today.
Absolutely.
And be funny. Okay, no pressure whatsoever.
Yeah, we're going to need like 5 or 6 jokes throughout the entire thing, so make sure.
All right.
So here's the first question for you. You're a weight loss expert. You've helped thousands of people lose lots of weight. So can you tell us about your personal weight loss experience and how you help other people actually achieve their ideal body weight?
Absolutely. So thank you. I mean, I do consider myself somewhat of an expert only because I have kept weight loss of 50 pounds off for 6 years now. And when I look at the statistics on weight loss, they say something like 98% of people that ever lose weight gain it all back within 2 years. So that's why I do consider myself somewhat of an expert, because for the first 52 years of my life, I did everything wrong in an attempt to lose weight and manage my weight loss. I think everyone can lose weight, Cyrus. I mean, most people have gone on diets, whether they were healthy or not, and most people can figure out how to lose weight. The problem lies in how to keep it off. And the answer is, in a broad sense, it's in a plant-based diet, but in a more specific sense, there's certain types of the plant-based diet that are more conducive to weight loss and weight management, especially for people that have been overweight a long time, especially for people that suffer from food addictions. And so what I do is I basically teach calorie density. It's not really rocket science. All the wonderful doctors that have gone before me, like Dr. Gene Ornish in his book, Eat More, Weigh Less, or Dr. McDougall with his book, The McDougall Program for Maximum Weight Loss, pretty much all the plant-based books that are of a healthy bent focus on this principle called calorie density. And that's really all I teach. I think I found a way to really understand it, implement it, and actually simplify it. But I didn't reinvent the wheel. I just think I understood it well. I applied it. It worked. And I teach other people to do it. And the great thing is if you do it, it never doesn't work.
So tell us a little bit here about what calorie density is, and how do you use it to guide people to lose weight?
Absolutely. So in what I love about calorie density is it's not personal. It's science. So in other words, a lot of people beat themselves up for their inability to lose weight or control their cravings. And they'll say things like, I was really bad today because I ate a cookie. Oh, I was really good today because I ate kale. I don't think people are bad or good because of their food choices. I look at it like, well, you either eat calorically dense food or calorically dilute food or somewhere in between. And that's going to determine your success. And so basically calorie density, which has been around since food has been around, simply means the calories per pound of food. That's all it means. Or if you're in another country, I guess they do liters maybe instead of pounds. But in the United States, we say it's calories per pound of food. And food ranges in caloric density from about 100 calories a pound, which are the non-starchy vegetables, to, believe it or not, 4,000 calories a pound, which is processed oils, which don't exist in nature. And we know from all the wonderful books before us and Forks Over Knives that are also deleterious to our health. So that means there's a 40-fold difference in the caloric density of foods. And because Americans eat 92% of their calories from animal products and processed foods, which are very calorically dense, it's no surprise that more than 3/4 are overweight or obese. So if we just get back to the basics, and when I say the basics, what Dr. Neil Barnard at PCRM, the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, has called the PCRM Power Plate, the new 4 food groups: fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes, which have a caloric density of 100 to 600 calories per pound. The research done at Penn State University by the person that's done the most work in the field of calorie density, Barbara Rolls, Dr. Barbara Rolls, has discovered that if you keep your average calorie density to about 567 calories per pound or less, which is what I call in my program foods to the left of the red line, fruits, vegetables, and whole grains and legumes, which are not only the most calorically dilute foods, but also the most nutrient dense, pretty much everybody gets down to a really good weight and can stay there. But that's not what we're eating in this country.
So the foods that most people are eating, meats, cheeses, packaged products, fish. Where do those lie on the calorie density scale?
Okay. Well, they lie. I put this red line right after legumes, and most of them. Now that you can probably find a very few amount of maybe like lean game meat that might be of a lower caloric density, but for the most part, animal products average about 1,000 calories per pound, which is 10 times that of vegetables and 5 times that of fruit and 4 times that of potatoes or sweet potatoes. Many animal products like salmon, which is very fatty, could be as high as 1,600 calories a pound. There are cheese, for example, which is probably one of the most deleterious of all the animal products because it's also a processed food, is 1,600 calories a pound. And like I said, the processed oils are 4,000 calories a pound. Sugar and flour, sugar is 1,800 calories a pound. And Americans eat over 150 pounds per person per year. That's about 900 calories just from sugar. Flour and bread is about 1,400 to 1,500 calories a pound. And so I don't even argue with people anymore if these foods are healthy. What's really cool is, yes, I teach a 100% vegan program. I've been vegan for over 40 years, but I teach in spas that are not vegan and cruise ships. I don't even have to mention vegan because I'm basically teaching math here. Even if animal products were healthy and oils were healthy, which I don't believe they are, and I believe you don't believe they are, I don't even need to get into that with people because most people are so desperate to lose weight. It's really that it's a mathematical problem, not an emotional problem that causes them to be overweight. Because even if fish and chicken and oil and cheese and flour and sugar were healthy, the reality is, according to the research, that it's just too calorically dense for the average person to eat in any discernible or measurable amount and not be overweight or obese. And so I'm taking away these very unhealthy foods just because of their caloric density without even having to get into all the reasons that they're also unhealthy. And think about it. What do animal products and processed food have in common other than their high caloric density? Well, none of them, they contain no fiber. That's the thing. And Americans are on a sorely fiber deficient diet. Fiber is so important, not just to weight loss, but pretty much to every bodily process. It helps flush out toxins. It removes waste. It prevents certain cancers like colon cancers. It binds to cholesterol. Fiber is so important. But if we're eating less than 10% of our calories from fruits and vegetables and 92% from animal products and processed food, most people are not getting any fiber. That's why Dr. Dennis Burkitt would say, if you pass small stools, you need large hospitals because people just aren't pooping because you can't. If you're eating animal products and processed food, there's no fiber. Well, the other thing that's so cool about fiber, where weight loss is concerned, is fiber actually tricks the brain into thinking it was full on no calories. And when you have fiber with water intact, which is in the whole food, as long as you're not doing things like juicing where you're removing the fiber, but if you have the fiber and the water intact, and remember, animal products and processed food have zero to no fiber, zero to very little fiber, and they have no water. Well, when you have the fiber and water intact, like the whole plant food, you create what's known as bulk. And bulk is that nice feeling that after you eat, you feel satiated and full. Bulk is what creates satiety. And so if all you eat is animal products and processed food, you're going to have to eat and eat and eat just to feel full because you're not going to activate your stretch receptors because you can't on a fiber deficient diet. So it's just really cool how God or nature, whatever you want to say got us here, constructed that the actual healthiest foods on the planet are the most calorically dilute and the most nutrient dense. It's just brilliant. And I don't know why I couldn't have figured this out sooner.
This is great. So you're really good at explaining this into simple, understandable terms.
Thank you.
You're an expert in really the nuances of implementing the low-fat, plant-based whole food diet. And you teach a specifically SOS-free approach. So what is SOS? What does it stand for, and why is that important?
Yeah, well, SOS is the International Distress Signal. My mentor, Dr. Alan Goldhammer, says, because most people are in distress because of their diet. I actually added 2 letters to that acronym SOS. I actually teach a SOFAs-free diet. Sugar, oil, flour, alcohol, salt. And I tell people if they want to lose weight and get healthy, get off their sofas. And the reason I did that is I was always teaching SOS free like Dr. Goldhammer, but people weren't understanding that alcohol was still not acceptable for somebody that was trying to lose weight and get healthy. So I added the A, and I also added flour because even though Dr. Goldhammer says the first S, sugar, implies all carbohydrates, all refined carbohydrates, that is, people weren't getting it. So I teach sugar, oil, flour, alcohol, salt, which is how they teach people to eat at the True North Health Center that's been there for over 30 years. Now, I'm not saying everybody has to do this, Robbie, because the truth is I tell people all the time that my program, the Ultimate Weight Loss Program, should be the last stop on the train. If you can do a less restrictive program with a little bit of sugar, a little bit of flour, a little bit of salt, and have the calm, stable brain that you get from overcoming food addiction and get the health and weight goals you want, why would you do a more difficult program? But the reality is the people I get, which are mostly female women, 40s to 70s, they've tried every diet and nothing works. The cool thing is, and you know this too, because even without trying, your sofa's free. I mean, I know you. We've dined together. I cook some of my food. Maybe you don't, but we kind of have the same dietary principles. We both eat about 80-10-10, a low-fat, raw vegan diet, which makes sense to those of us that do it. It's the diet that existed in nature throughout human history. I mean, there was no oil in nature, or alcohol, or flour, or sugar, or salt, at least not in any concentrated or processed forms. But the reason I do that is because simply it works. It's the easiest. All those foods, the sugar, the oil, the flour, the alcohol, and salt, with the exception of salt, which has no calories, they're all, first of all, very high calorically dense. But these foods cause cravings. These foods fool our brain's satiety mechanisms. So I was talking about those. We have those stretch receptors, nutrient receptors, calorie receptors in our stomachs, but we also have receptors in our brain. And these processed foods, these highly refined foods that never existed in nature and still don't, they fool our brain's satiety mechanisms and they cause us to overeat. Now, if you're somebody that doesn't struggle with your weight, it's probably not that big of a deal if you added a little salt to your food or a little sugar to your oatmeal. But those of us that identify with this label of food addiction, which, by the way, is refined or processed food addiction. You can't be addicted to food and eating. When we use these chemicals and sugar and oil and salt and flour, they're not food, they're chemicals. They're more drug-like than food-like. Sugar and flour goes through the same refining process as drugs and alcohol. When we add them to our food, even in small amounts, they perpetuate overeating. They cause cravings. And so it's just so much easier to not eat them. Now, it's hard at first because people have been eating them since they're very young. I mean, people that weren't breastfed, they've been eating sugar and oil and salt in their formula since probably day one. So it takes a little while to neuroadapt, to get used to the taste of whole, natural, healthy food, like the food that we're seeing behind you. But when you do, we've dined together so many times. You and I enjoy our food as much as the people eating the triple cheeseburger enjoys their food. They just don't know what's possible because they haven't neuroadapted. And it's easy. It works. I know it's hard when people, travel or socially, but man, the taste of whole natural food, once you're not eating these highly processed foods, there's nothing like it. There's really nothing like it.
Absolutely. And one thing in particular on your whole SOFA acronym is salt. People really, really struggle with that one. What tips can you have for those who are trying?
And so I will say that I honor that and I acknowledge that because of sugar, oil, flour, alcohol, salt. Even somebody that comes to me, the most severe sugar addict, salt is the hardest. Now, I'm not telling people to not eat a diet with sodium because you would die. It's an essential nutrient. But if you're eating enough calories from whole natural food, you should be getting anywhere from 500 to 1,000 milligrams of sodium per day if you're eating enough calories. Now, the thing is that we have taste buds on the tip of our tongue for sweet and salty, and those are for survival. We're genetically hardwired to prefer the taste of sugar, fat, and salt for survival. And when we were in the natural world, that was fine because we didn't become overweight or sick from eating foods that were high in fat because things like avocados and nuts and seeds were seasonal. We had to open each nut by itself. And by the way, if you've ever seen a nut, a walnut's like this big, but then there's another shell and another shell. So we weren't like 3 pounds a day, on the recliner like you can get at Costco now. And there was no salt in nature. You think about it, no other species adds salt to their food. I watch Nat Geo and I don't like it when the lion kills the gazelle, but he doesn't sit there and salt it. The salt in nature came from vegetables, specifically like the green vegetables. And we crave salt because we historically, drank from rivers and streams that often were polluted. And in order to prevent dehydration, we always craved the foods with the highest sodium, which were vegetables. But remember, most Americans are eating either no vegetables or 3% of their calories from vegetables. So from a culinary standpoint, there's some tricks that people can do to get used to or to neuro-adapt from a high sodium diet to a low sodium diet. And depending on how quickly they want to go or where their health goals are, probably the easiest thing to do is to use something that isn't salt. And by salt, it doesn't matter if it's Celtic or Himalayan or Morton's. All salt is 2,300 milligrams of sodium per teaspoon, which is much more than we need a day to function optimally. But there are some substitutes. By substitutes, I don't mean like potassium chloride. I mean, there's some products that are much lower in sodium than salt. And the two that I recommend the most, one is called raw coconut aminos. It is a wheat-free, soy-free soy sauce that does contain sea salt. The ingredients are coconut sap and sea salt. But instead of having 2,300 milligrams of sodium per teaspoon, it has 95, which means you could use 8 tablespoons or 24 teaspoons for the same amount of sodium, but you wouldn't use that much. So at least you're using less salt. The other one is low sodium miso, and I know Dr. Greger is a big fan of miso for its health benefits, but miso can vary widely in how much sodium it has. So some could actually have more than salt, but there are certain brands like South River and Cold Mountain that you can get online or at health food stores that have only about 110 milligrams of sodium per teaspoon. So that's one trick I use in people that aren't willing to go salt-free all the way. The other thing I recommend is, at the very least, don't cook with salt. Don't cook with oil or sugar either, because when you cook with things, they dissipate. You can't taste them. Now, it's different if you want to add it at the table, like Dr. McDougall recommends, a sprinkle. That's the way to do it. But believe it or not, Americans get more sodium from processed foods like bread, where the salt is hidden, than they do even from things like French fries or potato chips. So the first advice is stop cooking with it. The second is you can use these interim things. The truth is, most people don't give these changes enough time, because if a person can go about 30 days without adding salt to their food, things like celery, things like greens will start to taste salty. You can use things like fresh herbs. There are ways to make food delicious, SOS free, without salt, but you either have to maybe be a chef or take a cooking class or get a cookbook like mine or Chef Bravo's or Kathy Fisher's, these SOS free chefs, to make, because we're not trying to get people to not eat flavor. We're trying to get the flavor in the non-lazy way. Salt is a very lazy, it really, and the other thing is I want people to understand, especially if they're trying to lose weight, is salt is an appetite stimulant. It actually makes you eat more food. And that might be a good thing if you've got a kid that won't eat their vegetables, or a senior citizen, to stimulate the appetite. But if your goal is weight loss, why would you want to add an appetite stimulant to your food? And people can do experiments themselves by just taking something that they like brown rice, and eating a certain amount and noticing what they eat. And then when you add salt or soy sauce, you just exponentially eat more food. And then when it's salty, guess what? You crave the opposite, which is sugar. It is so much easier to feel calm and balanced when you're not always having these stimulants. And caffeine, by the way, is another one I don't recommend, but I didn't know where to put it in the sofas, and Scofas didn't sound that good. There are some seasonings that I love. There are one is particularly called Benson's Table Tasty, because it actually does taste very much like salt. And this woman, Debbie Benson, has a whole line of salt-free seasonings, but I'm told that there's a whole bunch of others that I haven't tried, like the Mrs. Dash brand, because I happen to be allergic to black pepper. But there's so many ways to make foods flavorful. Roasting garlic, for example. Anytime you use onion and garlic in concert with each other, especially if they're roasted, there's ways to make food taste absolutely delicious. But the problem is, most people are so addicted to sugar, fat, and salt that the food does not taste good to them yet. But also think about it, myself as a chef, they don't teach us how to make healthy food in culinary school. So that's the other problem.
Amen to that. So let's transition a little bit here. When it comes to eating out at restaurants, I know that can be a really big pain in the butt for a lot of people.
Yes.
So do you have any specific tips for people, that have adopted a low-fat, plant-based, whole food diet that is sofa-free and still wants to go out to a restaurant and enjoy a meal? How do you actually do that?
Yeah, thank you. That's actually a chapter in my book, because it is hard, Cyrus. And I think the social aspect of eating differently or eating healthfully is probably the hardest for most people. So if you're me and Robbie, you bring your own food, but we're at a point in, you talk about mastering diabetes. I think Robbie and I have mastered the social situation. And I thank Robbie because he is the one that gave me permission to do this when he showed up at a party at my house with Dr. Doug Lyle in January of 2011. And even though I was perfectly willing to make food the way he could eat it, and there actually was, he brought his own food. And I'm like, you know what? If he can do it, I can do it. So that level is probably not going to be the most comfortable for most people. But I do want to tell you that it's not as weird as you think to bring your food to a restaurant. I run a program called the Ultimate Weight Loss Program online, but I also do it in person every now and then, where people come for a period of 30 days, 4 weeks, where they get education and dinner. And we give a prize to the person that gains the most health, which sometimes is measured by how much weight they lost, but we give them a prize, and the prize is usually a free ticket to the Live Ultimate Weight Loss Conference in Vegas. Well, we had this girl, and she actually lost more weight than anybody else. She lost 18 pounds in the 30. She was overweight, and she really wanted to win this, but she had to go to a lot of restaurants because that was her job. And so what she did, and she worked near what's called Restaurant Row on La Cienega, where the restaurants are not health promoting. They're places like Lowry's and, the Stinkin' Rose, real traditional meat and potatoes type restaurants. So she called the restaurant up. And by the way, it's always good to call a restaurant up to see if they'll accommodate you, because the worst they can say is no. The best time to call them up is in the non-peak hours after the lunch rush, before the dinner rush. Don't expect to show up at a restaurant at 7 o'clock on a Saturday night and have your unique needs met. But she called the restaurant up and she said, listen, I'm on a special diet, and this is the key word. You want to be kind, you want to be respectful, and you say, look, I don't mean to be difficult, but I'm on a special diet, doctor's orders. And I'm wondering if you would mind if I brought my own food. I will come early, and then you heat it up and plate it, and I will gladly pay. And the guy on the phone said, sure, lady, we do it all the time. And he charged her for the lowest price entree. Now, the worst anybody can say is no. If you don't ask, the answer is always no. Most people, when they're going outside to dine, unless it's just a last minute thing where they're shopping, pretty much know where they're going. And even if it was a last minute thing, almost everybody has one of these now. Look up the restaurant. If they have more than, I believe it is, 3 locations, they have to have their nutritional information online, and they have to have their menu online. Well, they don't have to, but they do. And so what you can do is you can navigate the menu. You can call them up and do the same thing, saying, listen, I've heard so many wonderful things about your restaurant. I can't wait to go there, but I'm on a very special diet, doctor's orders, or I have multiple food allergies. I'm wondering if you can accommodate me. Now, some restaurants, and even some vegan restaurants, have told me no substitutions. But other restaurants, if they want your business, they might say, well, what is your diet? And the thing is this is where you want to be flexible and don't expect necessarily a 5-star meal. So I will say, I can eat any fruit, vegetable, whole grain, or legume prepared almost any way, but I am not able to eat a single drop of oil or added salt or sugar. And some of my students and just other people I know from, like the NHA, the National Hygiene Association, have had really cute little business cards printed up. So you can ask them. The worst they can say is no. The other thing is you don't ask, you don't get. So when you look at the menu, let's say you want vegetables. We are big fans of vegetables in my world and in the Ultimate Weight Loss Program. You don't see any vegetables on the menu, but you notice they had a spinach omelet for breakfast. Well, guess what? They probably have spinach. So you can say, hey, could you just give me some steamed spinach or some raw spinach? The other thing you can do is the one from column A, one from column B. I've been in places where I didn't see beans and rice on the menu a la carte, but they had a wrap with beans and rice. So it's sort of like that scene from Jack Nicholson in 5 Easy Pieces where he says, hold the chicken salad, and the waitress goes, where do you want me to hold it? And he goes, between your knees. But the idea is you can ask for something and you're still going to pay the same price. The other idea is realize that when we dine with people or we go out, a social thing the food doesn't always have to be the center of the focus. So you could eat before you go so that you're less hungry when you get to the restaurant, and maybe order the simplest thing you can find, which may just be a plain salad, or, depending on the restaurant. You could not eat. I know that's a biggie for a lot of people, and they think other people will be offended, but you could say something like, well, this is my thing is like, oh gosh, I'm sorry, but I'm having a colonoscopy tomorrow. I've been having that colonoscopy tomorrow for like 10 years, even though I'm never going to have another colonoscopy again. Or, oh, I just had dental work. I can't, I'll just have a cup of tea. I mean, there's ways that I teach people so that they can be respectful of other people, but you don't, you don't always have to go along if there's nothing healthy for you to eat. And that's why I carry a food cooler with me everywhere. I always have healthy, compliant food with me, no matter what. And so there's ways to do it, or you can do the best you can. One of the things I recommend is to be if your goals are ultimate weight loss and optimal health, is to be as plant perfect as you can in your home, so that when you have these outside eating experiences, if you have to have an indiscretion, it may be less impactful to your health than if you weren't also eating healthily. But the idea is if you can make an outside eating event one that you have as much control as possible, by you be the one choosing the restaurant, you be the, navigating the menu in advance, calling, you can do this. But I got to tell you, when you eat the way me and Robbie eat, our food is so much better. When you go to a restaurant, even if they will do oil-free, and I'm told that there's certain restaurants in parts of the United States that will do oil-free, when you eat in accordance with the principles of calorie density, I cannot get enough food unless I spend like $50, because in my world, a servings of vegetables is a pound or 2 pounds. In a restaurant, it's 3 asparagus spears, for $5.95. So that's the other reason. For me, a restaurant now is a punishment, but it can be navigated amicably with your social group. Try to have as much control as you have by looking at the menu in advance, calling the restaurant in advance, and also think about having interactions with people that aren't just food-based. How about we go for a walk, or go to a yoga class, or go to paint night, or like maybe some brilliant chef out there will start a true SOS-free restaurant. I mean, I could help you, construct the menu, but that would be absolutely amazing if there was a place we could actually eat.
That was great. Thank you so much. A lot of really, really great tips there. Let's talk about eating plant perfect at home, like you talked about. So there's a very popular cooking device right now called the Instant Pot. Everybody's talking about it, and I just brought one to Cyrus in Costa Rica. We opened it up, and your name is on the official Instant Pot recipe guide. So can you tell us, what is this device? How does it work, and how can people incorporate it into their lifestyle?
This is really a game changer, because, like I said, been vegan for over 40 years, and people have said, well, I would eat healthier if I only had enough time or enough money, which are 2 resources that a lot of people seem to be sorely deficient in. But when you get a pressure cooker, and I recommend the Instant Pot because it's a great product, comes in multiple sizes and models, great customer service, stainless steel insert instead of nonstick, is that when you actually cook food yourself from scratch, it's going to be healthier, it's going to be cheaper, and it's actually going to take less time in a pressure cooker. So a pressure cooker cooks at a very high temperature, 249 degrees Fahrenheit, for a very short period of time. So let's take something like beans, which I'm sure you probably recommend to a lot of your diabetes clients because they're so great at balancing blood sugar and they're a resistant starch. Well, beans are wonderful, and you can probably buy a can of beans for 99 cents, but you could buy a pound of beans for 49 cents, which is going to make many, many more cans. A can of beans is about 1.5 cups. If you cook beans on the stove, that's great, but it takes about 2.5 hours. Not everybody has that much time. You cook them in your Instant Pot, depending on whether or not you soak them, it could take anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes. And since it's a wonderful device, the electric pressure cooker, unlike the stovetop pressure cooker where you have to babysit, you can literally set it, forget it, do something else, like watch the Mastering Diabetes summit, or take a bath or walk your dog. So it's really great. I have multiple Instant Pots because I do teach cooking, but one is not enough because, you've got, maybe you're cooking your rice in one, your beans in another. The other thing that's great is people say, well, I don't have room for another appliance. If you have an Instant Pot, you don't need a lot of the other appliances because it's not only a pressure cooker, it's also a slow cooker, it's also a rice cooker. You can also saute right in the pot, so you don't need to dirty another pan on the stove. If you're somebody that enjoys soy or coconut or almond yogurt, it's a yogurt maker. I believe there's 2 other functions, which I can't remember what they are, sterilizer and something else. But it's just a wonderful device, and it makes the foods taste delicious. It actually seals in the nutrients. People are worried, but the truth is, if there's any liquid left, like for instance, yesterday I cooked a big kabocha squash. It was an 8-pound squash. in 10 minutes. And the liquid that was in the thing, I drank it. It was like nectar from the gods. So things that could take a long time, like, okay, so artichokes are probably my favorite vegetable, but they could take like an hour on the stove to boil. In the Instant Pot, I can do 4 jumbo artichokes in 7 minutes. And what I can do is also infuse the water with some lovely spices, like I love to use smoked paprika and chipotle powder. Corn on the cob. If you cook corn in an Instant Pot, you don't even have to take anything off because the silk and the husk literally melts off after 3 minutes. Something like steel cut oats that would take an hour on the stove will take 5 minutes in the Instant Pot. So you save so much time, and ultimately you save money, because when you buy things like whole grains and legumes in bulk, they're infinitely less expensive. So it's my husband can even use the Instant Pot. It's really that easy. I know it has a lot of buttons, which I don't know what they mean because I didn't read the book, but they've got one button called manual where you just push it, you put in the amount of minutes, and boom. And it's fantastic.
I've always been curious. What would happen if you put a banana in an Instant Pot? I just
Well, I will try that and get back to you. I don't know, but I'll try it. I don't know the answer.
My gut tells me it would actually be quite tasty.
Well, let's try it. I don't have any bananas right now, but I love a challenge, and I'm going to try it and I'm going to report back to you. Now, I can tell you when you put a banana in the air fryer, it's amazing because you're roasting it with the peel or a plantain. That is delicious, whether you're going to eat it as part of your meal, like maybe with some rice and beans, or even peel it and then freeze it for banana ice cream. That is such a great question that when we get off the computer, I'm going to ask the owner of the Instant Pot what happened. I love the way your mind. I don't know, but now I'm going to try it. You asked me.
So you talked about an air fryer here. That's actually another awesome kitchen gadget that we actually love as well. The reason why it's important is because you can use an air fryer and use not a little bit of oil, but zero oil.
Yes.
Tell us about it.
So here's the thing. You don't have to have an air fryer or even an Instant Pot to eat healthy if you're willing to eat simply. But these are tools that can make the food quick and it can make it delicious. So what an air fryer does is, like you say, it's this machine that it could come in different sizes. Some are about the size of an Instant Pot that almost looks like the old-fashioned women's hair dryers that we used to have. And some, like the granddaddy of all air fryers, the Breville, are these huge ovens that sit on your counter. And what they do is, without oil, you can take a food that you already like and eat, like let's say potatoes or sweet potatoes, and put them in whole, but mostly cut them into fries. And in about 20 minutes, you have crisp, delicious French fries, which you don't have to add any oil or salt to, that rivals any French fry you've ever had. Kids eat it, regular people eat it. You put spices on there if you want. If you did that in your oven, which you could, you don't have to have an air fryer, you're going to take about 10 minutes just to preheat that oven, and it's going to take a lot longer because, remember, this is a smaller unit, so it cooks faster. What I love, Cyrus, about the air fryer, even as much as I love doing potatoes in it, is that I think that vegetables are probably the most important food we can eat for health. Well, fruits and vegetables, but produce in other words. And it's not that hard to get people to eat potatoes, rice, and beans. I don't think it is, because it's starch. It's higher in caloric density. We prefer foods at a higher caloric density. They're delicious. Most people don't have an aversion to them. And even most people don't have an aversion to fruit. Usually you can get people to eat fruit, but good luck getting people to eat vegetables, which is the food most associated with weight loss. They did a study at Tufts, and they showed that the people that ate the most servings of vegetables and fruit consistently had the lowest body weight and BMI. So I'm trying to get people to eat vegetables. They don't like them. But if something happens in an air fryer, and I don't know what it is, I almost feel like in the Flintstones when they had like a camera that was really like a little animal inside doing everything. Something happens to food in an air fryer, and maybe partly is because you're increasing caloric density by removing water, which I don't worry about so much with vegetables, because even if you remove the water, you're basically changing a food that was 100 calories a pound to 200. You're not making it 40 times as calorically dense by adding oil. But even vegetables that I've never been crazy about, like, for instance, mushrooms. I don't hate mushrooms, but when you put them in the air fryer, I don't know what happens to them. Even plain, they're delicious. Things like cauliflower, things like broccoli. So I have found that people that are completely adverse to vegetables, by using the air fryer, they'll eat them. And they're delicious. And these are people, especially like kids and husbands, that just won't eat vegetables any other way. So I think it can be a really useful tool. But like you said, I think one of the most useful things is it is another way to cook with zero oil. And I know some of the air fryers will say you can use a teaspoon, use less oil. I've had mine a year now. I have never put oil in my Instant Pot or my air fryer. So it's just another way to make food taste absolutely delicious. Corn in the air fryer. Oh my God. It's just, it's just, I don't know, I love it. It was given to me as a birthday present a year ago, and I use it every day, and I use my Instant Pot every day. And I live in a part of Southern California that's called the San Fernando Valley. It gets very hot here in my apartment when it's like 100 degrees. When I turn my oven on, my whole apartment gets hot. When I turn my air fryer on, just this little tiny area in the kitchen gets hot. I love it. And, it's great. And they're not that expensive. You can get one. I've seen them for less than $100. And same for the Instant Pot. I've seen them as low as $69.
This is awesome. These are wonderful tips.
Thank you.
So the final question we've been asking all our experts is about the number one challenge you have seen with all the people you've helped over all these years, and how do you help them overcome that number one challenge to transitioning to this lifestyle?
Yeah. It's a couple things. Can I say two? Or, well, okay.
Go ahead. Two is fine.
All right. So depending on the person, at first it appears that the number one challenge is that the food's not going to taste good, that it's not going to be sustainable, that their palate's not going to adjust. And that's actually the easy one, because I can teach them delicious recipes. I teach cooking classes. So that one is usually answered pretty quickly when they see how good the food is. And especially when they get off the sofas and they really enjoy the taste of a sweet potato and things like that. So that's always like the initial thing that this food is going to taste terrible. I'm going to have deprivation. I'm not going to enjoy eating in my life. And that one usually we can conquer in about 30 days. Most people neuroadapt, at least. Some people take a little longer. But the hardest thing, Robbie, and we talked a little bit about the restaurant, is the social aspect. There's a saying by John Donne, no man is an island. And we are intensely social creatures. We're not like, cats that can live alone and, hunt alone and not really have interactions. People like people, most people, and they like being with people, and they live in families. In the old days, they lived in little villages of something like 30 people. And especially the women, at least, and are not being sexist here, but it seems that more women have this disease, what I call the disease to please. They're often people pleasers, and they care what people think about them. They don't want to be different. They don't want to be a problem. So they're very accommodating, and that translates to food, and often translates to eating something that maybe isn't good for them, that they don't want to eat because somebody made it just for them. So I find this social aspect to be the most difficult for the people that I encounter. And so we can't just say, well, you got to divorce your husband and get rid of your kids because they're eating differently and you're still cooking this food. No, we can't do that. Some cases, I think it might be better for the person. But so what we try to do is build new community. I think about Kevin Costner in Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. And what you're doing is wonderful. And I try to do the same thing. Is we can't always get rid of the unhealthy people in our life. I mean, sometimes we should, because I think if somebody is an enabler or a food bully that's actually trying to derail you, you might want to, it's different if you're married to them, but sometimes we have to be willing to change our groups of friends as we get healthier. It's sort of like, if somebody's an alcoholic and comes out of rehab, they can't go back to their job as a bartender, and they can't hang around the old gang that's still drinking, or they're going to relapse. And so I'm not saying that it has to be that way with when you adopt a whole food plant-based diet, that you can't be friends with people that eat differently. But what I am saying is that support is generally very important to people, so to know that you're not alone. So therefore, in addition to the people that you're still engaging with that maybe don't want to change in a healthful direction, find new people. And so how do we find that? Well, you and I both go to conferences. There's thousands there. There's online support groups like your group, Mastering Diabetes, my group, the Ultimate Weight Loss Program. So finding a tribe of like-minded people. And if you can't find a whole group, maybe where you live, there's just not a lot of people eating this way, start a group. There's a website called meetup.com for something like $12 a month. You can find a group and make a description so that you can try to connect with people within a certain geographical distance that you can meet with. But here's the good news, is that even if you can't connect with somebody in person, which would be wonderful and probably best, even having one person as a buddy or an online support system works just as well. But you can't do this alone. I mean, some people can, but if you're a gregarious person, if you are an outgoing person, if you're more of an extrovert, it's going to be really hard to go it alone, which you don't have to anymore, because if you're watching this, that means you have access to a computer, which means you have access to Facebook and Meetup and all of our wonderful groups. So, there's a saying, find your tribe and love them hard. That I think is the biggest obstacle for people, because they're getting better, they're getting healthier, and unfortunately many of their loved ones are staying overweight and sick, and they sort of have a foot in this world and a foot in that world, and that's what I see is the ongoing problem. Because the food, 30 days, a little bit more, we can make it taste delicious, but we can't change your spouse that's unwilling to get healthy with you, if it is your spouse or your children. That, I think, the social aspect is the biggest obstacle for a lot of people. They give up. It's too hard. It's too hard. And that's why I find a group that you can resonate with, so that you can express when you have these challenges, that we get it, and we can give you tips and tricks and tools. And that's what I think it is. And so, luckily, I don't care what people think about me. And I think you're somewhat the same way. We're both Aries. Not that we don't care, but our health is more important to us than what somebody else thinks about us, because we brought our food to their house for dinner, because we take our health that seriously. Because in your case, with your type 1 diabetes, you can't just be dicking around with taking a chance that they might have put something in. And with my food allergies and my food addiction, I feel the same. I mean, you and I are kindred spirits, like, actually, and I just, so, yeah, come to my birthday party this year and bring your own food, please.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is actually really, really helpful, because, I've only admittedly recently started learning about you, started learning about, the tools that you provide to people. And I think that your knowledge is just unbelievable.
Well, thanks. Hey, you just gave me an idea. You do those webinars. I'll do one on calorie density. I got a great one that will knock your socks off.
Done. We'll do it. No question. So how do people find out about you? How do they become a follower? How do they become a groupie? Plug yourself.
Absolutely. So, if you Google Chef AJ, you'll probably get more than you want. But my website is eatunprocessed.com. And if you are free on Wednesdays at 4 p.m. Pacific time, I do a weekly broadcast called Weight Loss Wednesdays. It's live on my Facebook Chef AJ page. And within 24 hours, I put it on YouTube. There's now over 60 episodes. So you can get more of me for free than you ever wanted. I also do run something called the Ultimate Weight Loss Program if you need more support. And once a year in Vegas, we do the live Ultimate Weight Loss Conference. And this year we have Dr. Neil Barnard coming. So I'm everywhere, pretty much, that people will have me.
That's excellent. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. And like Sarah said, you're just a wealth of knowledge. So
thanks. I appreciate what you guys are doing. And thank you so much for having me.